She did it right where I didn't expect it. She jumped on it so fast and intensely that I never thought my life would take such a surreal turn. But here I am, typing this out in the quiet of my dimly lit apartment. My name's Jake, and I guess you could say I've always been the guy who believes in giving people the benefit of the doubt, especially my wife, Amanda. We've been married for 8 years, and up until a few months ago, I thought we were solid. We had the usual ups and downs, but who doesn't? She's beautiful, smart, and sassy in a way that makes life interesting. I loved her, scratch that. I still love her, even after everything. But here's the kicker. Amanda cheated on me. Not with someone at work or a neighbor, but with a steward on a freaking airplane. And I found out in the most humiliating way imaginable. It all started 3 months ago when we planned a trip to Hawaii. We hadn't gone on a proper vacation in years, and Amanda had been hinting about it nonstop. So I saved up, booked everything, and figured this trip would bring us closer. Looking back, I wish I had just stayed home. The flight was uneventful. At least, that's what I thought. Amanda was her usual bubbly self, chatting with the flight attendants and sipping on overpriced wine while I listened to a podcast about self-improvement or something equally ironic. About halfway through the flight, she excused herself to use the restroom. Nothing unusual, right? But then, she was gone for almost 20 minutes. When she came back, her face was flushed, and she looked slightly disheveled. "Long line," she mumbled before downing the rest of her wine. I didn't think much of it at the time, but something felt off. Fast forward to the end of the flight. Amanda was gathering our carry-ons when one of the stewards, a guy named Brandon with the most annoyingly charming smile, stopped by our row. He handed me a small business card and said, "Safe travels, sir. And by the way, your wife's an absolute gem." I don't know why, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. Amanda's face froze for a split second before she forced a laugh. "What a flirt, huh?" she said, tugging me toward the exit. I should have brushed it off, but something in his tone, in Amanda's overly casual reaction, planted a seed of suspicion in my mind. Little did I know, that was the first crack in a foundation I'd thought was unshakable. And here's where things get crazy. 3 months later, Brandon, the steward, reached out to me. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and I was sprawled out on the couch, flipping through channels aimlessly. Amanda was in the kitchen humming to herself, making her famous chicken casserole. Things had been relatively normal since the trip. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. Then my phone buzzed. The message came from an unknown number. "Hey Jake, we need to talk. It's about Amanda." I stared at the screen for a moment, my mind racing. Who the hell would text me something like that? My gut reaction was to delete it, but curiosity won. I replied, keeping it short. "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "Brandon, from your flight to Hawaii. I think your wife and I have unfinished business." My stomach dropped. It couldn't be that, Brandon. I sat up straight, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Before I could think of what to say, another message came through. "She's probably in the kitchen right now, isn't she? Still making you think nothing's wrong? Meet me at the coffee shop on Elm tomorrow at 10. I'll explain everything." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Who the hell did this guy think he was? But more importantly, what did he know? My brain started spinning in 100 directions. I glanced toward the kitchen. Amanda was still humming, completely unaware of the storm brewing on my phone. She looked so normal, like the woman I'd married. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a sick joke or some creep who'd seen us on the flight. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't random. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach the same way I'd felt it that day on the plane. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. I tried to act normal, but Amanda noticed I was distracted. "You okay, babe?" she asked, setting a plate in front of me. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a long day." She didn't push further, and I was grateful. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment of that flight in my head. Brandon's weird comment, Amanda's flushed face, the long line at the restroom. Was I crazy, or was there something more? The next morning, I drove to the coffee shop on Elm, telling Amanda I had an early meeting. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I could not show up. Brandon was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a smug grin plastered across his face. He looked every bit the cocky steward I remembered, chiseled jawline, perfectly styled hair, and an air of arrogance that made me want to punch him on the spot. "Jake," he said, standing up and extending a hand like we were old pals. I ignored it. "Talk," I said, sitting down across from him. He smirked, taking a sip of his coffee. "Straight to the point. I like that." I didn't respond. My patience was paper thin, and he seemed to enjoy dragging it out. Finally, he leaned forward. "Your wife and I, well, let's just say she wasn't entirely honest about what went down on that flight." My jaw clenched. "Get to the point." He sighed dramatically, like he was savoring the moment. "Fine. We hooked up. In the restroom, mid-flight. She practically threw herself at me. I felt my world tilt. The room seemed too small, too loud. I stared at him, trying to process his words. "You're lying," I said, though my voice wavered. "Oh, I'm not," he said, pulling out his phone. "I have proof. Text she sent me afterward, thanking me for the experience." He slid the phone across the table, the screen glowing with messages. There they were, texts from Amanda's number, thanking him for being discreet and calling the encounter exhilarating. I wanted to smash his phone, flip the table, do anything but sit there and stare at those messages. Brandon leaned back, crossing his arms. "She's good at hiding things, huh? But she's playing the perfect wife at home right now." The anger boiled over. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" He shrugged. "Honestly, I felt bad. You seem like a decent guy. Thought you should know the truth." "Yeah, because you're such a stand-up guy," I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He didn't even flinch. "Look, I don't care if you believe me, but I'd start paying closer attention to what Amanda's been up to. She's not as innocent as you think." I left the coffee shop in a daze, Brandon's words echoing in my head. When I got home, Amanda was waiting with her usual bright smile. "How was your meeting?" she asked, kissing my cheek. I didn't answer. The ride home from the coffee shop felt like I was on autopilot. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but my mind was far away, trapped in a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and disbelief. Brandon's smug grin was seared into my memory, as were those texts. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I still hadn't figured out what to do. Should I confront Amanda? Should I dig deeper? A small part of me clung to the idea that this was all some kind of sick hoax. Maybe Brandon had faked those texts. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Amanda greeted me at the door like nothing was wrong. She wrapped her arms around me, her warmth so familiar it made me feel sick. How could someone who seemed so loving, so normal, be capable of what Brandon claimed? "How was your meeting?" she asked, smiling up at me. "It was fine," I said, forcing a neutral tone. She frowned slightly. "You sure? You seem off." I felt my chest tighten. She could always read me like a book. But instead of addressing the elephant in the room, I deflected. "Just tired, I guess." Long morning. Amanda didn't press further, but I could feel her watching me as I headed upstairs. Once I was in the bedroom, I locked the door and pulled out my phone. I started scrolling through her social media, looking for anything suspicious. It was all curated perfection. Photos of us smiling, posts about family dinners, even her bragging about the trip to Hawaii. But there was nothing about Brandon. No comments, no likes, no connection that I could see. I moved on to her phone records. Amanda had shared her password with me years ago when we were setting up a family plan, so I used it to log in. My hands shook as I scrolled through the call logs and text history. Then I saw it. The number wasn't saved under a name, but it was there, a recurring contact with frequent calls and messages around the time of our trip. The dates lined up almost perfectly with the flight to Hawaii, and the number matched the one Brandon had texted me from. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. There was undeniable proof. She hadn't just cheated, she'd been in contact with him for months afterward. That evening, I tried to act normal, but every word, every glance Amanda gave me felt like a dagger. I could barely sit through dinner, even as she chatted away about her day like nothing was wrong. After the kids went to bed, she joined me on the couch, curling up beside me. "You've been so quiet today," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "Is everything okay?" It took everything in me not to push her away. I forced a smile. Just work stuff. You know how it is. She kissed my cheek. Well, I'm here if you want to talk. Her words, so sweet and caring, made my skin crawl. How could she be so calm, so affectionate, when she'd betrayed me like that? The next day, I couldn't take it anymore. I called in sick to work and spent the morning digging through every digital corner of our life. I combed through emails, cloud backups, and even her old laptop. That's when I hit the jackpot. In an old folder labeled Vacation Pics, I found screenshots of conversations, texts between Amanda and Brandon. My stomach churned as I skimmed through them. They were flirtatious, suggestive, and filled with references to their special time on the plane. One message in particular made my blood run cold. It was risky, but worth it. Let's plan something even wilder. Next time, I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling with rage. There it was, staring me in the face. Confirmation of everything Brandon had said. That evening, Amanda came home to find me sitting at the dining table, the laptop open in front of me. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I looked up at her, my eyes locked on hers. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold. Her smile faltered. "About what?" I turned the laptop around so she could see the screen. The screenshot of her text with Brandon glared back at her. Amanda's face went pale. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for words. "Well?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She finally spoke, her voice shaking. "It's not what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, it's not? So, you didn't cheat on me with some steward on our vacation flight? You didn't keep texting him for months afterward?" Her eyes welled up with tears, and for a second, I thought she might actually come clean. But then she doubled down. "I was lonely," she said, her voice breaking. "You've been so distant, Jake. Always working late, always distracted. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." Her excuses only fueled my anger. "Don't you dare blame this on me," I snapped. "I was working my butt off for us, for our family, and this is how you repay me." Amanda started crying, covering her face with her hands. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'll do anything to fix this. Please, Jake, don't throw everything away." Her tears might have worked on me once, but not anymore. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You already threw everything away," I said, my voice low and steady. And with that, I walked out, leaving Amanda standing there, her sobs echoing behind me, that I drove aimlessly for hours after walking out, my thoughts a chaotic mess of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone had destroyed everything we'd built, and now she wanted me to believe it was just a mistake, a spur-of-the-moment lapse in judgment. But it wasn't just a mistake. It was planned, calculated. The messages, the months of secrecy, it all pointed to one thing. She didn't regret what she'd done. She regretted getting caught. At some point, I found myself parked outside a bar I hadn't been to in years. I went inside, ordered a drink, and let the noise of the crowd drown out my thoughts. But even with the music blaring and people laughing around me, one thing became clear. I couldn't just let this go. Amanda had torn apart our marriage, but I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. She thought she could betray me and get away with it? Not a chance. And then, as I stared into my glass, the idea started to form. A way to turn the tables. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, but the plan was crystal clear. I wasn't going to confront Amanda again. Not yet. She had no idea how much I knew or how far I was willing to go. If she wanted to play games, I'd play too. First, I needed evidence, real evidence. Not just for myself, but for leverage. Something that would leave no doubt in anyone's mind about what she'd done. The texts and screenshots were a start, but I needed more. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could. I installed a small voice recorder in the living room, knowing she often called her friends there while I was out. I checked our shared accounts, looking for unexplained charges or hidden expenses. And every night, after she went to bed, I scoured her phone, her laptop, and even her emails. It didn't take long to find more. I discovered hotel bookings she'd made months ago, all during times when she claimed to be working late or catching up with the girls. I found deleted photos in her cloud storage, blurry selfies of her and Brandon, drinks in hand, clearly taken after that flight. But the final straw came when I checked the voice recorder. Amanda wasn't just hiding her affair from me. She was confiding in her best friend, Lisa. One recording hit me like a sledgehammer. "I don't know what to do," Amanda's voice said, shaky but determined. "Brandon keeps texting me, and I'm afraid Jake's starting to get suspicious." Lisa sighed audibly. "Why don't you just stop talking to him? You said it was just a fling, right? Move on before Jake figures it out." Amanda hesitated. "It's not that simple. Brandon, he's different. And besides, he knows things. If Jake ever finds out..." My heart raced as I replayed the recording. Brandon wasn't just some random fling. He had some kind of hold over her. For days, I kept my distance, letting Amanda believe everything was fine. I smiled when I had to, acted like the loving husband, and even pretended to forget our last argument. She seemed to buy it, though there was a nervousness to her that hadn't been there before. Then one evening, while Amanda was out, I decided it was time to bring Brandon back into the picture. I still had his number from the text he'd sent me, so I dialed it, my hand steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "Jake," he answered after a few rings, his voice dripping with fake charm. "I was wondering when you'd call again." "Cut the crap," I said, my tone cold. "We need to meet." He chuckled. "What, no pleasantries? You're really leaning into the angry husband vibe? Huh?" I clenched my teeth. "I'm not playing games, Brandon. Tomorrow. Noon. Same coffee shop." "Fine," he said, clearly amused. "See you then." The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early, positioning myself at a table in the corner where I could see the entrance. Brandon showed up a few minutes later, looking as smug as ever. He sat across from me, his expression a mix of curiosity and arrogance. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "what's this about?" I didn't bother with pleasantries. I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "That's everything I've got on you and Amanda. Texts, photos, recordings, you name it." Brandon raised an eyebrow as he opened the folder, flipping through the contents. His smirk faltered for the first time. "Impressive," he said, closing the folder and setting it down. "But what do you want from me?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "You're going to help me. Amanda doesn't know I've been talking to you, and I plan to keep it that way. If she wants to play dirty, we're going to play dirtier." Brandon studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, that cocky grin back in full force. "I like your style, Jake. What's the plan?" Brandon leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his grin firmly in place. "All right, Jake, I'm all ears. What's your master plan?" For a moment, I considered punching that smirk right off his face. But I needed him, at least for now. If anyone could help me drag Amanda's betrayal into the light, it was the smug steward who started this whole mess. "Simple," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You're going to get Amanda to come clean. On record." Brandon raised an eyebrow, his smug grin faltering. "You want me to what?" "Be your little spy." I glared at him. "You owe me that much. You've already ruined my marriage, so consider this your way of making it right." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I don't owe you anything, Jake. Your wife came to me, remember? If anything, I did her a favor." The rage bubbled up again, but I forced it back down. I couldn't let him derail this. "Let me spell it out for you," I said, leaning in closer. "If you help me, I keep this," I tapped the folder, "to myself. No one else has to know. But if you don't, I'll make sure every airline in the country knows about your extracurricular activities. Let's see how far that charm of yours gets you when you're blacklisted from the industry." Brandon's smirk vanished. For the first time, he looked genuinely uneasy. "You wouldn't. Try me," I said, my voice low and firm. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then finally he sighed. "Fine, what do you need me to do?" I felt a surge of satisfaction. "You're going to meet Amanda. Get her to talk about what happened on the flight and about anything else she might be hiding. I want details, names, dates, everything." "And how do you plan to record it?" he asked, crossing his arms again. I pulled a small voice recorder out of my pocket and slid it across the table. "You're going to wear this. Hide it in your jacket or whatever. Just make sure it picks up everything she says." Brandon picked up the recorder, examining it like it was some alien artifact. You're really going all in, huh? You have no idea, I said. The next few days were a blur of anticipation and paranoia. Brandon had agreed to set up a meeting with Amanda, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he might double-cross me. I kept my phone close at all times, waiting for updates. Finally, Brandon texted me. Meeting her tomorrow. Wish me luck. I didn't respond. The following day, I waited in agony, pacing the house and checking my phone every 5 minutes. Amanda had gone out, saying she was meeting Lisa for lunch. I didn't ask questions. I already knew the truth. Hours passed before Brandon finally called. It's done, he said, his voice clipped. Meet me at the park in an hour. When I arrived, Brandon was sitting on a bench, the recorder in his hand. He looked surprisingly serious, his usual smirk nowhere to be found. Here, he said, handing me the recorder. It's all there. What did she say? I asked, my voice shaking. Brandon sighed. Everything you wanted to hear. She admitted to the affair, the texts, the meetups. And there's more. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean more? He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. Let's just say your wife's been a lot busier than you think. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What the hell are you talking about? Listen to the recording, he said, standing up. You'll understand. He walked away without another word, leaving me alone with the recorder. My hands trembled as I hit play. At first, it was just small talk, Amanda's nervous laughter, Brandon's usual charm. But then the conversation shifted. I can't keep doing this, Amanda said, her voice shaky. Jake's going to find out sooner or later. Brandon chuckled. You said that 3 months ago. You're still here. There was a long pause. Then Amanda's voice came back, quieter this time. I don't have a choice. If Jake knew about everything, it would destroy him. What do you mean, everything? Brandon asked. Another pause. It's not just you, Amanda admitted. There's someone else. The blood drained from my face. What, like another fling? Brandon asked, his tone surprised. No, Amanda said firmly. It's more than that. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. And if Jake ever finds out... Her voice trailed off, leaving Brandon and me in stunned silence. I hit stop on the recorder, my heart pounding. Someone else. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It was something bigger, something darker. And whatever it was, Amanda was hiding it with everything she had. That I replayed the recording, my hands trembling. Amanda's voice echoed in my head. If Jake ever finds out. Someone else? What did she mean? My mind raced through possibilities. Another affair? A secret she'd kept from the beginning of our marriage? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. When Amanda came home that evening, I was waiting for her in the living room. She froze when she saw me sitting there, the recorder on the table in front of me. What's this? She asked, her voice wary. Sit down, I said, my tone cold. She hesitated, but eventually sank into the armchair across from me. I hit play on the recorder. Her eyes widened as her own voice filled the room. Her face went pale as the conversation with Brandon played out. By the time it reached the part about someone else, she was visibly shaking. Care to explain? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I didn't want you to find out like this, she stammered. Find out what? I snapped. That Brandon wasn't the only one? That you've been lying to me for years. Tears welled up in her eyes. It's not what you think. Then tell me. I shouted. She looked down at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. There was someone else before we got married. I thought it was over, but he came back into my life a year ago. I didn't know how to tell you. Her words hit me like a freight train. A year. She'd been lying to me for over a year. Who is he? I demanded. Amanda hesitated, then finally muttered a name that made my blood run cold. Eric. Eric. My former college roommate, the guy I'd trusted with everything back in the day. Hearing Eric's name was like a slap across the face. Memories of our friendship flashed through my mind. Late-night study sessions, road trips, and the trust I'd once had in him. Eric? Eric? I repeated, my voice rising. The guy who stood next to me at our wedding? The guy who toasted to our lifelong happiness. Amanda nodded, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't supposed to happen, Jake. I thought I could handle it. I thought it would go away. But it didn't, I said through gritted teeth. She shook her head, covering her face with her hands. He reached out last year, said he missed me, that he never stopped thinking about me. I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't know how to tell me? I spat, standing up and pacing the room. So, you just kept sneaking around? How long, Amanda? How long were you meeting him? For a few months, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife had been lying to me for over a year, hiding an affair with someone I once considered a brother. You're unbelievable, I said, staring at her with disgust. And to think, I was ready to believe it was just Brandon. Her head snapped up. It was a mistake, she pleaded. Eric is not in my life anymore. I ended it months ago. Convenient, I said coldly. And Brandon? Did you end that too? Or were you planning to keep him around as backup? Her silence was answer enough. I can't do this right now, I said, grabbing my keys. I need space. Jake, please, she begged, standing up. Don't leave. We can fix this. I turned to her, my voice calm but firm. The only thing you've fixed is my understanding of who you really are. I walked out, slamming the door behind me, the weight of her betrayal crashing down like a tidal wave that I drove for hours, letting the silence and the hum of the car numb my thoughts. I didn't have a destination in mind until one hit me like a spark in the dark. Eric. If Amanda thought I'd take her word that it was over, she was dead wrong. I needed to hear it from him, to see the look in his eyes when he admitted to betraying me. I knew exactly where to find him. Eric ran his own real estate firm in the city, and I'd been to his office countless times. My hands gripped the wheel tightly as I pulled into the parking lot. The receptionist looked startled when I marched in. I need to see Eric, I said flatly. Do you have an appointment? She asked nervously. No, but I'm sure he'll want to see me, I replied, my tone leaving no room for argument. Moments later, Eric appeared in the hallway, his expression shifting from surprise to unease when he saw me. Jake, he said, forcing a smile. What's going on? You tell me, I said, stepping closer. Let's talk. Privately. He hesitated, but led me into his office. The moment the door closed, I didn't waste time. How long have you been sleeping with my wife? Eric's face paled. Jake, Don't even try to deny it, I snapped. She already told me everything. He sat down heavily in his chair, running a hand through his hair. It was a mistake, he said quietly. I didn't mean for it to happen. I laughed bitterly. That's funny because that's exactly what Amanda said. Do you two rehearse this crap together? Eric looked at me, guilt written all over his face. It's over, Jake. It ended months ago. I swear. Why, Eric? I demanded, slamming my hands on his desk. You were my friend. You stood at my wedding, for crying out loud. Was that just for show? I don't have an excuse, he said, his voice low. I messed up. I've been beating myself up about it ever since. Good, I said coldly, because you're about to feel a whole lot worse. I turned and left without another word, ignoring his calls for me to wait. As I walked back to my car, I realized something. Amanda's betrayal had hurt deeply, but Eric's felt like the final nail in the coffin that I drove home with my mind spinning, replaying every conversation and lie I'd uncovered. Amanda's affair with Brandon was humiliating. Eric's betrayal was enraging. But something still didn't add up. Eric claimed their affair had ended months ago, yet Amanda's words on the recording suggested there was more she wasn't saying. And Brandon's cryptic warning, your wife's been a lot busier than you think, kept gnawing at me. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Amanda wasn't in the kitchen or the living room. I found her sitting on the bed, her face streaked with tears. Where were you? She asked softly. Out, I said curtly. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Jake, I know you're angry, but I need you to understand. Save it. I cut her off. We're past apologies, Amanda. But there's something I need to know. Who else? She blinked confused. What? Don't play dumb, I said, my voice sharp. You said Brandon wasn't the only one. You said Eric wasn't the only one. So who else, Amanda? How many secrets are you hiding? Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. It's not what you think, she whispered. I leaned closer. Then tell me, Amanda, what is it? She hesitated for a long moment, then finally said, I don't know if Eric is. I'm not sure. My stomach sank. Not sure about what? Her voice trembled as she spoke. There's a chance Eric might be the father of Lily. The room tilted. Lily, our 6-year-old daughter, the light of my life. I stared at her, my heart pounding. You're telling me there's a chance our daughter isn't mine? Amanda nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. It was one time years ago before we were married. I didn't think. I cut her off, my voice cold. You didn't think I deserved to know? She sobbed harder, but I couldn't bring myself to feel anything but anger. My marriage, my family, my very identity, it was all unraveling before my eyes. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and walked out, slamming the door behind me. That I drove aimlessly, the weight of Amanda's revelation suffocating me. Lily might not be my daughter. The words echoed in my head, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. I finally pulled over in a deserted parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I needed answers, but the only way to get them was to take the step I'd never thought I'd have to take. The next morning, I made an appointment at a private clinic for a paternity test. The nurse assured me it would be discreet and quick. I told Amanda nothing. When I got home, Amanda was waiting in the living room. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but I couldn't let myself feel sympathy. We need to talk, she said, her voice shaking. We've done enough talking, I replied, walking past her. Jake, please, she pleaded, following me. I know I've hurt you, but I never meant for things to get this far. I love you. I love our family. Do you? I snapped, spinning around to face her. Because every action you've taken says otherwise. You lied, you cheated, and now I have to question whether my daughter is even mine. She flinched at my words, her tears starting anew. Jake, I swear Lily is yours. I'm almost certain. Almost isn't good enough, I said coldly. Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch. I don't know what else to say, she whispered. Then don't say anything, I said, turning away. I'll let the test decide. For the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. Amanda tried to act normal around the kids, but I could see the cracks in her facade. Meanwhile, I counted the hours until the results would come back. When the call finally came, I answered with shaking hands. Mr. Thompson, the nurse said, her voice calm and professional. The test results are ready. I can confirm that you are the biological father of Lily. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly drowned out by the tidal wave of anger and betrayal that remained. One truth was settled, but the damage Amanda had done to our marriage was far from fixed. When I told her the results, she broke down, clutching my hands. I told you, she sobbed. She's yours, Jake. She's always been yours. Maybe Lily is mine, I said, pulling my hands away, but I'm not sure you ever were. After the paternity results came in, I thought I'd feel a sense of clarity, but instead, I was left with the same tangled mess of emotions. I had answers about Lily, but not about Amanda's web of lies. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't Amanda. Against my better judgment, I found myself dialing Brandon. Jake, he answered, clearly surprised. Didn't expect to hear from you again. Don't get cocky, I said flatly. I need more answers, and you're going to help me. He laughed. And why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll make sure every airline knows you can't keep your hands to yourself. I snapped. There was a pause, then a sigh. All right, fine. What do you want to know? Did Amanda ever mention Eric to you? I asked. Brandon hesitated. Yeah, actually. She said he was an old flame or something. Why? Because he's not just an old flame, I said bitterly. He's my ex-friend, and he might have been involved in this longer than I realized. Brandon whistled. Damn. She really played you, huh? Save the commentary, I said. Do you know if she was still in contact with him when she was seeing you? She didn't say much about him, Brandon admitted. But now that you mention it, she did get weird a couple of times when I asked about her past. Like she was trying to dodge the topic. That wasn't the definitive answer I'd hoped for, but it was enough to confirm my suspicions. Amanda had been lying about more than just her recent affairs. You're useless, I muttered, ready to hang up. Hey, Brandon said quickly. If you're looking for dirt, check her email. That's how we used to keep in touch. Less obvious than texting. I ended the call without another word and went straight to Amanda's laptop. Her email was still logged in. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. messages from Eric. Some were dated over a year ago, others much more recent. Far too recent for her claim that it was over. One email in particular stopped me cold. Subject: You're playing with fire. From Eric. Date: 3 weeks ago. Amanda, you need to end things with Brandon and focus. If Jake finds out, it won't just be your marriage that falls apart. It'll be all of us. My hands trembled as I read the message over and over. What did he mean by all of us? There was more going on here than I'd imagined, and I wasn't about to let them keep me in the dark any longer. That I stared at the email, my mind racing. It'll be all of us. What did Eric mean? How deep did this go? Amanda's lies were bad enough, but now it seemed like she wasn't just covering for herself. There was more to this, something bigger. I scrolled through the rest of her emails, looking for anything that connected Eric, Brandon, and Amanda. That's when I found it. An email chain from 6 months ago, sent to a group of addresses, including Eric's and Amanda's. Subject: Update on the account. From a name I didn't recognize. The message was short, vague. Amanda, Eric, and Brandon. Everything's progressing smoothly. The account transfer should be complete by the end of the month. Keep Jake distracted. My blood ran cold. Account transfer? They were working together? I dug deeper, searching for more emails from the same sender. What I found painted a chilling picture. Amanda and Eric had been funneling money from our joint savings into a private account. Brandon was involved too, acting as some kind of distraction while they carried out their scheme. It was all there: transactions, documents, and messages discussing how to cover their tracks. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a full-blown conspiracy. The realization hit me like a freight train. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They were actively trying to ruin me financially. I sat back, my fist clenched. They thought they could outsmart me, that I wouldn't notice until it was too late. But now I had the evidence, and I was going to make them pay. The anger coursing through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Betrayal was one thing, but to know that Amanda, Eric, and Brandon had been conspiring to drain my accounts? That crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I needed to act, but I couldn't let them know I was onto them. Not yet. If they suspected I had evidence, they'd try to cover their tracks. I had to stay calm, play the fool just a little longer, and set the stage for my own revenge. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer, someone I trusted, someone far removed from any of Amanda's connections. I laid everything out: the affairs, the emails, the financial transfers. He listened carefully, his expression grim. "You've got a solid case," he said. "But if you want to catch them in the act, we'll need to move carefully." "What do I do?" I asked. "Freeze your accounts," he said. "Make it impossible for them to move any more money. And start documenting everything. Every email, every message. We'll need it all." I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. That night, I froze every account Amanda had access to, leaving just enough for her to think everything was normal. I didn't want her to realize the walls were closing in. The next morning, Amanda was in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had happened. I forced myself to smile and kiss her on the cheek, acting like the dutiful husband. "You're in a good mood," she said, eyeing me cautiously. "Just decided it's time to move forward." I lied. "No use dwelling on the past, right?" She smiled faintly, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Good. She should be nervous. Over the next few days, I worked behind the scenes, gathering everything I could. I went through Amanda's phone, finding more messages from Eric. Vague promises about finishing things soon. Brandon had gone quiet, which only made me more suspicious. Then, 2 days later, I got the break I needed. Amanda left her laptop open while she went to take a shower. I sat down and opened her browser history. There was a draft email to Eric and Brandon, asking about a meeting to finalize the plan. I took a screenshot, my heart racing. This was it. They were planning something big, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. With the draft email in hand, I knew it was time to force their hand. Amanda, Eric, and Brandon thought they were running the game, but I was about to flip the script. That evening, I confronted Amanda casually. "You've been on your laptop a lot lately," I said, keeping my tone light. "Anything interesting going on?" She froze for a split second before laughing nervously. "Just work stuff, trying to stay busy." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. "Makes sense. Let me know if you need help with anything." Her smile was tight, and I knew she could sense something was off. Good. Let her sweat. The next morning, I forwarded the draft email from her account to Eric and Brandon, pretending to be Amanda. I suggested a meeting at a local coffee shop to finalize everything. Then I sat back and waited. Eric replied within an hour, "Perfect. Let's meet Thursday at noon." Brandon was less enthusiastic. "I'm not sure this is a good idea. Jake's been acting weird." I laughed bitterly at his sudden caution. "Too late for that now, buddy." When Thursday came, I was ready. I arrived at the coffee shop an hour early, sitting in the back corner where I could watch everything. My lawyer and a private investigator I'd hired were stationed nearby, ready to document whatever went down. Eric arrived first, looking smug as always. He ordered a coffee and sat at a table near the window, scrolling through his phone. Brandon came in next, his usual arrogance replaced by nervous glances. "You sure about this?" he asked Eric as he sat down. "Relax," Eric said, waving him off. "Amanda said everything's under control." They started talking in hushed voices, but I could hear enough to piece it together. They were finalizing plans to transfer the last of the money into a hidden account. And then Amanda walked in. She spotted them immediately, her face pale as she slid into the seat between them. "What are you two doing here together?" she asked, her voice low. "Your email," Eric said, frowning. "You told us to meet." Amanda's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "I didn't send an email." Eric and Brandon exchanged uneasy glances, realizing too late that something was wrong. That's when I stepped out of the shadows. "Funny," I said, my voice calm but icy, because I did. Their heads snapped toward me, shock and fear written all over their faces. The private investigator stepped forward, camera rolling, as my lawyer approached with a folder of evidence. "Gentlemen," he said, "you're going to want to hear this." The game was up. The look on their faces was priceless. Amanda frozen in shock, Eric's cocky demeanor shattered, and Brandon squirming in his seat like a kid caught stealing. "What the hell is this?" Eric barked, standing up. "This," I said, stepping closer, "is the end of your little scheme. I know everything about the money, the lies, the affairs. And now, I have it all on record." Amanda's eyes darted between me and the private investigator, realization dawning. "Jake, please," she started, but I held up a hand. "Don't. You've done enough," I said coldly. Eric's face twisted with anger. "You can't prove anything," he snapped. My lawyer smirked, pulling out the folder of evidence. "Actually, we can. We've got emails, financial records, and even audio of your client here." He gestured to Amanda, admitting to the entire scheme. Brandon paled. "I didn't even touch the money. That was all Eric and Amanda." "Coward," Eric muttered under his breath, glaring at him. Amanda buried her face in her hands, shaking her head. "Jake, I didn't want it to go this far. I was scared. And Eric." "Save it," I cut her off. "You chose this. You all did. And now you're going to face the consequences." The private investigator handed me a USB drive containing the compiled evidence, and my lawyer made it clear to all three of them that the next steps were out of their hands. Legal action was already in motion, and there was no way for them to wiggle free. Amanda broke down, pleading with me. "Jake, we can fix this. Please, for the kids." "For the kids?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think you were thinking about them when you plotted to ruin me? When you dragged Eric and Brandon into this mess?" Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I turned and walked out, leaving the three of them to stew in their guilt and fear. Over the next few weeks, everything unraveled for Amanda and her co-conspirators. The frozen accounts blocked their access to the stolen money, and Eric's involvement led to an investigation into his firm's practices. Brandon, predictably, threw everyone under the bus to save his own skin, but it didn't matter. The evidence was airtight. As for Amanda, our marriage ended swiftly. I filed for divorce, and the court sided heavily in my favor. She lost custody of the kids, her reputation in tatters. I moved into a new place, focusing on rebuilding my life with Lily and our son. It wasn't easy, but it was peaceful, free from lies and manipulation. The last I heard of Eric, he was fighting to keep his job and reputation, though I doubted he'd succeed. Brandon disappeared from my radar, and Amanda moved out of state, trying to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Sometimes, betrayal isn't just about broken hearts. It's about reclaiming what's yours and ensuring those who wronged you face justice. And that's exactly what I did.